So you got to know what you have. You got to know which people you have. And like I said, nobody wants the lame guys, but they serve a purpose. And you can't know a church's collective potential until you know the potential of the people. Why? Because as every kid knows, when they play with little green army men, there is purpose in the difference of the different kinds of people. And so what do? You do what's called an SWOT analysis. SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay, strengths and weaknesses, what we do well and where our growing edges are to be found. Those tend to be internal descriptions. While as opportunities and threats, what things come up that we can capitalize on and what things hinder our ability to move forward, those tend to be external things. So what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? So many churches say, well, we're a friendly church. And as I've said before, what they really mean is we're friendly to each other. But how do we welcome the stranger who walks in the door? Then the question is, what holds us back? Did you know that there are 4 measuring tools to measure church capacity? And those 4 are worship space, Sunday school space, parking space, and nursery space. And statistically, if any one of them is at 80% or greater, it can hinder a church's ability to grow and to move forward. If any one of those 4, well, we are beyond capacity in 2 of those things. Sunday school space and parking space. And we have pushed up against the capacity during the last 7 years of the other 2 at different times. Worship space and nursery space. I contend that the biggest thing that hinders our ability to make disciples is our space. So the first checkpoint is the checkpoint of involvement. Second checkpoint is the checkpoint of assessment. The third checkpoint is the checkpoint of placement, specifically positioning people. And there are 3 aspects to that checkpoint: who, where, and when. Who is crucial? Finding the right person, someone who's passionate about serving and not just a warm body to put on a list. And yet that's irrelevant if they're not correctly matched with where. Because we all have our own gifts and graces. But the right person in the wrong place isn't helpful. So it's crucial to match gifts and graces with the needs of the position. And once those 2 things are in place, the last piece is knowing the right time to put the right person in the right place. And let me say up front, your church works hard at that, trying through prayer and discernment to help enable people to be successful in the ministries that they have committed to. So checkpoint of involvement, assessment, placement. The 4th checkpoint is the checkpoint of development. And it never fails. Once you have all your little green army men in place and you're ready to commence battle, something happens. I was absolutely sure, Dwayne and I were talking, I was absolutely sure that when I moved this from here to here, I'd knock half of them over. Once you get them all set up, something happens. Your kid brother runs through, the dog runs through, the vacuum cleaner runs through. And you have to regroup and you have to adapt. I've heard it said that a leader who's not willing to revise their plan rarely reaches their destination. So many times churches put grand plans into place, into action, and at the first sight of a bump in the road, they get cold feet and they scrap it all. But to quote President Bush I, when you hit a bump in the road, you need to stay the course. If we believe that God has called us to the missions that we were involved in and the staff that we have running this church, then we need to be confident of that fact and we need to stay the course. So, checkpoint of involvement, assessment, placement, development, and the last one is the checkpoint of refinement. Little Green Army men would call it by its military name, which is debriefing. And it focuses on establishing specific points when the church intentionally gathers to review what they've done, assess the success thus far, and refine the plan to go forward. It's important to periodically check the compass. and make sure that necessary course adjustments to ensure that you're still on track are being made. You see, Little Green Army men are amazingly simple in form. No moving parts, no batteries, but they can teach us something that's profound. Because like Little Green Army men, the core of strategic planning is really pretty simple. It's where are we, where do we want to be, and how do we get there? And when we implement these 5 checkpoints, the checkpoints of involvement and assessment and placement and development and refinement, we find we win more spiritual battles than we lose. Here's an interesting statistic. Half of the population say that their faith is a critical resource in helping them respond to the 9/11 attacks. Let me say that again. Half the people in this country say that their faith is a critical resource in helping them respond to those 9/11 attacks. But a recent poll suggests that religious beliefs and practices haven't changed since then. Immediately after the attacks, church attendance rose. And for several weeks, church attendance was up. But then by November of that year, 2 months, it fell back to normal. And since then, there's been no measurable lasting change in people's religious practices. And to me, that says something about the spiritual complacency of our nation. I read a story about an atheist, and this is supposedly a true story, that he was so determined to be an atheist to the end that in his will, he left his farm to the devil. And when he died, the legal system was dumbfounded as to what to do about that. And they discussed it and discussed it and discussed it, and finally, they figured the best way to carry out his plans were to let the weeds take over his farm, and let the house and the barn slowly crumble onto its foundations, and let the soil erode and wash away. And in its ruling, the court stated, the best way to let the devil have possession of anything is to do nothing. Life is a composite of the decisions that we make. Every decision that we make either moves us closer to our goals or farther away from our goals. And even if we don't know where we're going, we will end up somewhere, but we might not like where that is. So are we moving toward our goals, or are we moving farther away? Sometimes we need to work smarter and not harder. Commit to doing a few things well instead of a lot of things not so well. Sometimes we need to focus on setting right priorities to take control of our lives, collective lives. It amazes me when people say they want to be strong in Jesus and deepen their relationship with Him, and then they spend a grand total of 60 minutes a week on that relationship. They say they want their kids to think that Jesus is important in life, but they treat sports and band and TV and whatever else is on the list as more important. They want to be committed as long as it doesn't interfere with all their other stuff. We need to not just live life. We need to not just let life happen around us. Instead, we need to set priorities and do some strategic planning. Henry Ford said, before everything else, getting ready is the secret to success. If you want to live an abundant life in Jesus Christ, it's not going to happen by accident. It takes planning, and it takes commitment to the goals that God has established for our lives, individually and collectively. If we want godly children, and godly marriages, and godly lives, and a godly church, we have to identify the plan that God has for our lives. And then we have to plan the work and work the plan. Because the Little Green Army men tell us that success is found in the setup. Now, as the musicians come forward, we're going to spend some time praying about that. We're going to spend some time, and what I want us to ask ourselves individually, and only you and God know the answer to this, is how much emphasis do I place on my spiritual life? Is God number one in my life? Or is He farther down the list? And the easy way to tell is, where is your time spent? Where is your talent spent? Where is your attention and your love and your care spent? But that's what I want us to each ask God. And again, only you will know that. But if you find the answer is less than satisfying, then I want you to pray that God will help build that up. That God will help instill such a love for God that it becomes a priority, a greater priority in our lives. That we help our children and our community see that we need to put God first, and everything else tends to take care of itself when we do that. Would you stand as we sing?